Spectrum Extra on Radio 1 FM 90. An extra hour of analysis and discussion on the topical issues of the week. Brought to you by Housing Finance Bank, a financial institution regulated by Bank of Uganda. Housing Finance Bank, we make it easy. Your views, our interviews on Spectrum, Radio 1 FM 90.
It's a Friday, and this is Spectrum Extra on Radio 1 FM 90, the time that we review the major events of the week. Today, we'll be focusing on the State of the Nation address, which was actually delivered by President YKMUSEVEni yesterday at Kololo, which is a constitutional obligation not only to tell the country how far he has gone in implementing what he promised the previous year, but also officially opening Parliament. Well, President YKMUSEVEni spoke about so many things yesterday. He spoke about the economy, and he talked about how there's going to be focus on actually growing the economy further through focusing on value addition, promotion of the knowledge-based economy, investing more in tourism, among other sectors. He also talked about the need for Ugandans actually to shun sectarianism and tribalism, saying those do not add any value to the country. He keeps on using the example of considering the other tribes as a market. Focus on production, and the other Ugandans, regardless of their tribe, will provide the market for the goods and services that you provide. One of the key things he spoke about was corruption. On Matters Day, the president had promised to actually focus on it much more, and yesterday, indeed, he did speak about it, telling us that politicians and public servants who are stealing public resources will be crushed. He actually confirmed that he now has evidence to the effect that there is syndicated corruption between the Minister of Finance, chief accounting officers who actually handle the resources in the different government departments, and Parliament of the Republic of Uganda. So everyone is waiting to see what kind of action will be taken. He had suggested amnesty, but the people who were listening to him actually said they needed to see those involved punished. So the president used the phrase blood to actually show that he will be taking action. Well, this stance by the president comes at a time when there is a censure motion being propelled in Parliament by Remiaga County MP Theodore Sechkubo and his colleagues, who want commissioners of Parliament relieved of their duties. We'll be also looking at that particular issue because there were controversies emerging this week as the NRM party told its members in Parliament not to sign the censure motion. We also saw some colleagues of Theodore Sechkubo, other MPs, who actually criticizing them for taking this step. But we also saw some MPs actually suggesting that they were likely to withdraw their signatures. One of them actually wrote to the Speaker telling her that she had been misled into signing that censure motion. We'll also be looking at other issues the President talked about. Mercenaries, people working for foreigners, receiving money from abroad. The President also spoke about the issue of interest rates, but he also, most importantly, spoke about the East Africa integration agenda. His view is that political federation should be fast-tracked. And as you might have heard in our news there was an extraordinary meeting of the heads of state, and a decision has been taken that indeed political federation will be fast-tracked. Will this be delivered in time, and why is President YKMUSEVENi determined to see this happening? I have a panel of 4. Let me introduce Dr. Fred Muhumza, Senior Economist, Director of the Economic Forum of Makerere University Business School, where he's also a lecturer. He has been an advisor at the Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development for quite some time. Good evening, and thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Muhumza.
Thank you, and good evening, our listeners, and some viewers out there, who knows.
All right, thank you so much for joining us. Ms. Charity IMBC, Executive Director, Election Law Institute, Uganda Chapter. Once a journalist, always a journalist. Umutu wa wansi, seasoned election observer. Good evening, and thank you very much for joining us today.
And thank you very much, Ken, and a very good evening to all our listeners, those online and those offline. I'm excited to be here.
Ms. Perry Aritua, Executive Director of Women Democracy Network, Uganda Chapter, lawyer, pundit on governance and human rights matters. She's also a seasoned election observer. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Kenneth. Good evening, viewers and listeners, and my fellow panelists.
Dr. James Toheo, Senior Officer in the Office of the President, also a member of the Central Executive Committee of the ruling NRM party, where he represents workers. Good evening, Dr. Toheo. Thank you very much for
everybody, listeners, viewers, and colleagues and friends who are within me in the studio here.
Thank you very much for indeed joining us. Dear listener, be part of this show by sharing your views with us on our WhatsApp line, which is 0703 090. It could be a comment or question. The panelists in studio will respond to you. Now, let's kick off this discussion, and I'll come to you, Dr. Fred Muhumza, to give us your quick, comments about the State of the Nation address, even before we go deeper to look at the issues there. Did this address meet your expectation? Do you think it provides the clear picture of the state of affairs in Uganda today?
Thank you very much. And I think State of the Nation, sometimes we expect so much into it. First of all, it's time-bound. The president can't speak for 2 days to describe the state of the nation. There are times when you go to a doctor for a test, and they can do some light tests, but there are times when they do deeper tests and say some results will come out after 3 days. So really, if you want to look at the state of the nation, it will be quite a lot of things to ask for, but the president has to give pointers. And so the sections he pointed out, he looked at the strategy, nationalization, knowledge economy, and sorts of things, exports. He talked about corruption. The economy has those, but really at that point you're describing that you have red eyes. That is the quick thing. But what does the corruption mean to the economy? Because that's the real state of the economy. You see money that has gone into certain segments, which is like blood clotting in one part of the body. Those who have stolen the money, they will show you what they have done with themselves and with the money. But what would that money have done elsewhere? You want to look at those, and those would take deeper analysis. Look at what economists and other people call the counterfactual. What would it have been? You also want to look at the fundamentals. What is the institutions like? And he hinted on it about the restructuring. He said the public service is continuing to conclude on that matter, but we already know what Parliament, which direction it took, and the rumors about them. There are rumors out there. But for me, the whole point was, why were we doing rationalization? Now, that point was lost out in the parliamentary discussions and the other discussions. So right now, I don't know what public service is doing, because in any case, the rationalization was about, one, scaling down the budget spending in order to avoid excessive borrowing. You can't stop borrowing, but excessive borrowing can be avoided because it has significant implications that already describe the state of the economy. There are many things we can't do because debt takes the first call on resources. Even before you pay security, even before you repair your roads, you buy drugs, debt is the first to grab its money. And we don't even take the budget to Parliament for them to discuss debt payment. It is for information. Because when they allowed you to borrow, they committed. So now if debt is going to be eating over 40% of your budget, then the state of the economy is going to go down. So rationalization was speaking to those things on how do I avoid getting deeper into debt and avoid its implications. So when you see the state of the roads, you want to relate that to debt, and you want to say, therefore, the rationalization was partly speaking to some of those complications. I was the other day asking people, how did we get to where Karuma Bridge is? And you know all our major bridges have had this problem. Katonga the other day, thank God we had some alternative, but that alternative was adding a cost, especially when you're a business person. Me and you could easily drive through and people are like, hey, this countryside is beautiful. But for a person who drives a semi-trailer, to add that extra journey and the delays that were there is adding to their cost. Now, how did Katonga get to that level? These are bridges we should have replaced possibly 20 years ago. Now Karuma has come up. People are not seeing the implication of Karuma on the economy. Because remember, most of the trucks for business move at night. They have been moving at night for obvious reasons. But now, they cannot move at night because the park, the last entry, is 6 p.m. So for somebody, even before you talk about that time lost of movement, you have added an extra cost if I'm going to Guru. To branch off from Masindi and add all those extra journeys to get to Guru and from Guru to Kampala.
There's an eastern road.
No, that is even a longer one as well. So you look at all those options. But you now imagine, forget about the business people. For them, they can easily accommodate that and cut their losses. Now, what we usually say, the state of the economy is related to security. And whenever there is war, the first thing your enemy goes for is infrastructure. They will bomb your airports, they will bomb your bridges. Now, here we are, we have really put ourselves into a dicey situation. What if the UPDF wanted to deploy either from northern Uganda to the south or from the south to northern Uganda? For whatever emergency, their tanks can't use that bridge. They also have to go through the eastern route and the north. Now, you put yourself into a very dicey, risky situation. Such bridges, which institution is supposed to be monitoring them to say the lifespan of this bridge was 60 years, 15 years are left, begin the replacement. The way we did it on the Ginger Nile Bridge. The other one was still functioning, we put a new bridge. Now, who is monitoring that? That's basically, for me, policy and institutions. And maybe we didn't get too deep into that, but as I've said, the president's mentioning of corruption, it is institutional. There are other issues of how do you restructure government to behave is policy. And it doesn't matter how big your budget is. The Ugandan budget, the bigger it grows, the lower the growth rate.
All right.
Meaning the two are not speaking to each other, which is policy and institutions. So if you get into those, you get to understand the state of the economy.
We'll come back to you to dig deeper. Perry, your initial thoughts about the State of the Nation address.
For me, it reminded me of, an old radio, where you listen, but it's in the corner somewhere. The music is going on, but you have no connection. What I found missing was there was no connection to the population. In fact, just from the title, I didn't see anything about Ugandans. There was reference to the speaker, the prime minister, the dignitaries, but the Ugandan.
There's no fellow Ugandans.
Exactly.
That's the word you wanted to see.
Not even that. For me, I didn't see the issues that are currently affecting the ordinary Ugandan being addressed, and I didn't see the future.
There's been a lot of talk about
that was
the layout of the Daily Monitor today. Yeah. If you saw it, the front page.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Wananchi means who?
The Wananchi means the citizen.
Whatever they are producing, that's what they set up.
The citizen.
The Wananchi.
The thing is, it's even in Swahili.
Your second national language.
Me, I'm detached because I'm thinking, where do I feature? But in terms of content, I did not see the things that the ordinary Ugandan is grappling with now. The high cost of education, the issues affecting the health sector. I did not see, like the bipartisan dialogue that is required, especially in our politics. I didn't see that. We are going into an election. So I just, for me, it felt detached. I didn't really see the issues that the ordinary Ugandan is grappling with properly reflected in that speech.
Let's hear from Charity, your initial thoughts about the State of the Nation address.
So I like the fact that what I hear from Perry and what I hear from Dr. Muhumuza, but I want to pick it up right from the Monitor newspaper. And the Monitor, I like the way they summarized it.
That paper.
And this is what they said.
The paper that works for the enemy.
President Museveni used the national address to praise the embattled speaker. This is what the Monitor newspaper, I'm quoting verbatim, of Parliament, Anita Among, and attacked activists who were involved in exposing corruption, despite admitting to evidence of a graft racket at the heart of the government, sidestepping key public concerns about crime, social services. The head of state asked Ugandans to keep calm, carry on working, and watch out for talking cows. That for me was the thriller. They are talking cows he has been seeing in the Monitor newspaper. He grabbed the copy for himself. And as he went to Kololo to give the State of Nation address, he saw some talking cows. But before we address the talking cows, what is the Monitor telling us, which would actually have required many of us to call out? The president likes the Monitor newspaper, by the way, because he never talks about the new vision, but he does talk about the Monitor newspaper.
Which means he reads it a lot.
For which I think that he should not attack them. He should encourage them more and remember the article of 29 on press freedom and look like he's more of a protectionist than dismissive when he says he has seen talking cows within the Monitor newspaper. I think he should tell the Monitor, I like the way you analyze your things, the 3%, the 3% of inflation and how the economy is working. I think he should actually say, you Monitor newspaper, if you're not there, Uganda would be such a boring state for me, because at least you give me a bit of entertainment, you do a bit of analysis for me. That is what I expect the president to do, to protect more of the Monitor than to look like he is actually threatening them. Now, back to his speech. So the Monitor summarized it that way. And I want to go and pick on a few areas. If you pick the president's speech over the last 5 years, the State of the Nation address, you'll find certain common words he has used over and over and over. Let me just try to highlight only 7 of the words that appear more than 6 to 10 times in each of the speeches for the last 5 years. Number 1, sectarianism. Number 2, corruption. Number 3, NRM ideology. Number 4, democracy. Number 5, imperialists. If he doesn't say those things in his speech, it will not be complete. And then, to sum it all up, he likes the word democracy, the real and the perceived. And I am always very intrigued when he talks about the real and the perceived, because you see, democracy has tenets, and there are just 4. 1, elections. 2, human rights. 3, citizen participation. 4, the rule of law. But now for him, he says there is a perceived and a real. So which one is perceived, which one is real, and on which basis is it being best? I like his speech. Now, I have given you a scenario basing on his basic, exciting words that you'll always see in the State of Nation address. But that said, I think that the president has mastered the art of reverse psychology. If you read this speech, at one point he speaks and says, there is corruption and I'm going to crush them. These public officials, I'm going to crush them. They are corrupt. I've seen them. I've seen a racket in finance that is working with parliament. Before long, he's now saying on the other side, we need to protect, and I want to take him verbatim, we need to protect the young cadres. He said we need to protect these young cadres who are making mistakes even when they are corrupt. We need to protect them. Now he's going to crush them. Now we need to protect them. Then he comes out and says in the recent budget process, the parliament came together, they rationalized the budget, they synthesized this budget. It was the best budget the country has had. But you just saw Ugandans on social media saying, oh my God, we now have a 90 trillion debt. I don't know. I think the president needs to read the Monitor more, but he also needs to go onto the internet and see what Ugandans are saying more. Then he will understand that when he says here 190, the 190 are telling him that the debt has now soared to 90 trillion. And they are wondering, for them and their children and their children's children, how is it going to be like? The president seems not to connect the dots. At one point, he seems to say, now the economy and society are really moving forward. The president himself went here to the Soga land. It was Mayuge. And he cried and said, oh my God, this is how poor you are. It is true, you're poor. He cried, himself he cried. And now he's saying, we have moved on. Reverse psychology at its best. This is what I saw in this speech.
Very quickly, let's hear from Dr. James Tweheo. Your initial thoughts about the State of the Nation address.
Thank you, Kenneth. You know, even listening to my colleagues here, you will see that the president is consistent in not only his actions, but his speech. What he targeted to do from 1986 even with the bottlenecks and challenges and all those, he's still directional to it. That is why, even in his very speech of yesterday, he's mentioned the plan, the ideology that was built from the 80s up to today and consistently moving on. And you would see some of them being realized. He talked of recovery. Actually, to put it better, minimum recovery. And then he said we should move to the next stage of reconstruction. And then, in the process, we go to economic integration. And move on to using scientific knowledge and others to get there. You will understand that, yes, he is facing a lot of bottlenecks. And by the way, he's not alone. So if we are to look at President Museveni as an individual, yes, he's an individual as a head of state, as a head of government. But he has many, many, many other arms that have to move with him. And that is where his frustration comes from. But even then, he has not given up. So, was there any challenge when they came in? Yes. Have there been any minimum recovery? Yes. Yes, true, we shall see the potholes on the roads. Yes, we shall have the bridges having challenges. Yes, but there has been what we call minimum recovery. Then, is there any integration? You remember every other time he mentions the 3 C's and the 3 T's. Those who can remember them, the coffee, the cotton, the copper, and there's those others. But are they still the leading production elements that bring us money through export? Things have changed. So he's consistent in what he tries to get up to. But he's also one of the most frustrated, because quite often when he tries to move on, he has a number of things that pull him back. And that's what he must fight, grapple with, to disentangle himself out of them and move on. And one of them is clearly corruption. And he admits that.
All right, Dr. Tweheyo, do hold it there. Let's go for a break. When we return, I'll give you more time to actually conclude your point. Stay tuned to Radio 1 FM 90, but keep your comments coming via WhatsApp line, which is 0703 090 090. Stay tuned to Radio 1 FM 90. We'll continue after this break.
Spectrum Extra, Fridays 7 to 9 p.m. on Radio 1 FM 90.
Thank you so much for staying with us on Spectrum Extra live on Radio 1 FM 90. Review of the major events of the week. Focus on the State of the Nation address delivered by President YKMUSEVENI yesterday. My guests, Dr. Fred Muhumza, Ms. Charity Imbisiwe, Ms. Peria Ritua, and Dr. James Tweheyo. Before we went for the break, Dr. James Tweheyo was on the microphone making his point, and he had reached a point of corruption being a challenge. And this is where we want to dig deeper on this issue of corruption. And Dr. James Tweheyo, you take the lead there. President YKMUSEVENI promised to speak about this issue on Matters Day, and indeed it featured, you remember very well the contents of his speech, but one of the things people were surprised was when he suggested that maybe there should be amnesty for those implicated in that syndicate he talked about, the Minister of Finance, accounting officers, and Parliament, and that's the budgeting chain.
Yeah, no, the President has always been consistent in his thinking, as I said. Even if you can remember, even during the Mabati saga, he offered an amnesty to those who admit to having made a mistake and return. Even in this, all other things that we do, there are people who make mistakes. But when their intent and purpose were to do something good, although they are few, and those who make such mistakes admit to their mistakes, and they can pay. At one time, there was this gentleman who admitted to having stolen some money and eventually brought the money back. I think he had even got served. And later, there was an argument whether he should be taken to prison. But he said, no, me, I admit, I can even go to prison. But I made this mistake, I stole the money, but the money is here. So kindly forgive me. That's the sort of amnesty the President always talks about. But there are some people who are outright thieves. But even with those, the President has always been consistent on getting facts. And these facts, sometimes, by the way, you know, these politics we go through are very, very interesting. There are some people who can pedalize and they can appear implicating somebody as if really that person has done it. But later, when you go through it, you find that it is not true. You remember the WikiLeaks stories? the WikiLeaks. At the time, WikiLeaks was alarming the whole country, but later, where did it fizzle to? Some of these issues, really, we should always stop to think and look at them realistically. Are they the actual issues that we're talking about? Or we are looking at lopsided information that is intended to either blackmail or soil some people, or, so at times in politics, people want to have their way by using every other means. So the president is always very, very, very clear. And that's the very same philosophy he came with in the bush when he used to have the story of a jigger in the foot. When the jigger is in the foot, you cut off the foot, or you get a pin and
remove the jigger.
And remove the jigger.
All right.
And the foot recovers.
Let's use the analogy of the jigger.
Yes, absolutely.
And we should say these are the corrupt people.
Absolutely.
Now, one of the things that has disturbed very many Ugandans is the fact that the president has consistently said he knows the corrupt, not only once or twice, a number of times, but he does not remove them. He does not remove the jiggers.
Sometimes some of these people who are perceived to be corrupt are actually not the corrupt.
But the president says he knows them. He says he knows them.
I want to tell you, most innocent people have suffered. People who expose the corrupt can be pushed out of offices. People who expose the corrupt are chased out from jobs.
Instead of the corrupt.
Instead of the corrupt. Why and who does that? When the corrupt are positioned, and it is very, very difficult to expose them with ease and give the evidence, it becomes very difficult to remove them so as to take action that is appropriate. In some cases, by the way, you have seen people taken to court and they come out of the court clean. The very same court, where most of these cases have been even chased. So when we talk of corruption, we must understand the detail and nitty-gritty of it, and how we can tackle it.
So do you want to see amnesty in regard to the president?
I wouldn't love to see amnesty to the corrupt. I wouldn't love that. But I would love to see somebody taking extra care to understand that this is the real thief, instead of running after a hoax and leaving the thief. Because some of these real thieves, I can tell you, they are so tricky that at the end of the day, I have been able to move to some of these districts. The auditor general will go there and will not catch a thief.
All right.
And the people, quite often the people who lose money may not be the very actual thieves, but may be the careless persons who are unable to account. And even these auditors will tell you the money was accounted for and it passed through the books of accounts, but where is the work it was supposed to do?
All right. There are people who reacted to the president's position where he even suggested amnesty, and they had different thoughts. One, some people said the reason why the president wants to see amnesty is because those people implicated are too close to him and very powerful, and therefore he fears to antagonize them. I'm giving you the views that we heard from people. That was one opinion, that they are too powerful, they are too close politically, and therefore he can't touch them. Secondly, there are those who actually said maybe the president was testing the water to see how Parliament will react, and he got that reaction when they told him, no, we do not want amnesty. What do you think was the president's intention to use that word amnesty?
My reason is very clear. The president's intention, in my view, was to get the people who are making mistakes, genuine mistakes, and can admit them and make the recovery. And that is always his principle.
All right.
Even when we was dealing with rebels, we would offer amnesty.
All right. Dr. Mumza, in your initial remarks, you actually said that corruption is an institutional problem in Uganda. Let's pick it from there. You had the president's position on this. He has promised to crush the politicians, but also the public servants who are stealing public resources. And already I think he had some names based on what he said.
Yeah, I think just you link this with Dr. Toyo's submission. Consistency can actually be a problem. There comes a time when you need to change strategy.
And you become erratic or what?
Because you notice being consistent, the world has changed completely, that you need to reinvent yourself. Snakes really shed off their skin to become new and move on. So maybe part of the president's challenge is being consistent when he should be thinking of other things.
So people get used to him.
If corruption is a cancer, you don't behave like it's a jigger. And many people have said corruption is a cancer. The way doctors deal with a cancer, they will say, well, this one will have to cut off the part of the body to save the rest of the body.
Or to burn it.
you can ban depending on how far it has gone or what it's doing. But even chemo, you're trying to kill those cells, which I think is crushing of corruption. But sometimes you say, crushing is not the way. So doctors sometimes, what are they doing with chemo? You want to treat the cancer by denying it blood. Or you want to cut off the limb. So some of this corruption that is endemic and deep-seated, you can just say, send off those fellows home, or remove some of those corrupt institutions. Can we find other ways of doing things? So you sheriff the consistency. And some of these messages, like said earlier, the talking cows, Balaam in the Bible was saved by a talking donkey. So who knows, there might be some unusual things. So as I've said, consistency. You may want to listen to that bird on the tree, alerting you about a snake. Sometimes the wild animals survive by those birds in the tree telling them.
Maybe you have a thick skin.
So you want to look
the snake does not matter.
So you want to look into those. What should we be doing differently to move this country to the next level? And there are very many things that have really changed. He talks of production and then sales. That people must produce and sell in order to sustain their prosperity. But where do you sell? Again, he says, when you are all producing the same thing, you are not going to salvage yourselves. Now, that means you can no longer survive by selling to your fellow East Africans. First of all, their income levels are too low to sustain even your steel and iron. They are producing more or less the same things like you. The Tanzanians are producing rice, the Ugandans are producing rice. You begin to look and say, how do I get into other markets? And what will it take me to do that? It could be your very enemy. China and the US are not very good friends, but they are not very bad enemies either. Because they know they need each other when it comes to trade. So how do I tap into those big markets? And that's why colonial times, it was the 3 T's and C's that he was talking about.
All right.
Now, in his speech, he mentioned that tea is still there. Tea has actually died out. Copper died out. Tobacco died out. Cotton died out. So what is left? Tourism is neither here nor there, but at least it is somewhere.
All right.
So we need to rethink those and say, when the president mentioned some of these things, you pick them there. The intention is there, but certainly you need different strategies not to be consistent with the past.
Right, we'll be digging deep on that when we talk about the economy and the East African integration, because you seem to be connecting those things very well. But let's conclude on this issue of corruption. Perry, what would you like to see now that the president has told us that he has evidence that indeed there's been corruption taking place in the country?
Of course, it's action. Because we know the implications of corruption on all facets of life of Ugandans in this country. So we're looking for something new. I told you, I think a few months, that when the late Cecily Ogawa passed on, during his speech at her vigil in Parliament, he also said he knows that some of the MPs on committees receive money. He knows. The thing is, so what? If you know, what are you doing about it? Because even if you speak about a problem and you don't offer solutions or you don't act on it, it will continue to become bigger than what it is already. And if you just followed the conversations on social media, you can see people seem very agitated by the fact that he keeps mentioning the problem, but nothing is done. And then just, changing goalposts. Today you say those ones are mistakenly corrupt, then there are these ones who are dishonest. It's still stealing.
Yeah, those who invest here after stealing.
Yeah, it's just stealing public funds and all those controversies. And then, no mention of the whole saga in Parliament that is ongoing right now. There's a lot of uproar about some of those things. So for me, the question for us as Ugandans is, so what are you going to do about it? Because if you keep massaging the problem, then impunity thrives. Because for many people, I'm sure, who had the speech yesterday and are stealing public funds, it was almost like a go-ahead, because there's no solution that was offered. And that's why I said earlier that I did not see the solutions for the ordinary Ugandan, especially the things that are hurting the Ugandan right now. Because corruption has implications on all areas of our lives. So I really don't see anything much that is going to change. The sad thing is the problems are going to become more. The health sector is going to continue to suffer. There are basic things that some hospitals are grappling with. Last week, I think, NTV covered a Tuturu hospital. They lack basic things. No x-ray, no ultrasound machine. The incinerator does not work. You know, the things that the ordinary citizen grapples with on a daily. They didn't appear in this speech. And part of it is because of corruption. Money is being diverted for personal gain when the majority of Ugandans who benefit from these basic services are left like as if they are not part of the country. And for me, I think that's the sadness. That's why I said the speech for me sounded like an old song.
So what do you think is missing? What do we need to do?
It's action. He knows the problem. There are so many agencies that have been set up. The thing is, what actions are you going to take deliberately? We can learn from other countries that have tried to fight corruption. Our neighbors in Rwanda, they have tried. And you can see the effects of them dealing with corruption. It may not be total wipeout, but you can see they have better roads, they have better health care, you know. So there's a feeling, a sense of pride in some of the citizens. In July last year, there was a conference on Women Deliver, and we managed to visit. There are those people who do the PR for Rwanda, and you know, and many young people, you know, talking with so much pride, because when they travel to Uganda, and many of them travel to Uganda, they look at us as this orphan child. Terrible roads, drainage doesn't work. There were tourists who were also there in that conference. Some of them had come to visit Rwanda. And you know, the gorillas also travel between Uganda and Rwanda. And one of them said, you people, the gorillas are mainly in Uganda, but your roads are horrible. You know, in fact, one of them said, I hope they move more to the Rwandan side, because here we feel a sense of comfort.
No, that's an advantage. Because if the roads are good and you reach them, you're going to disrupt them. That's why you come to Uganda, because the roads can't allow you to disrupt their peace.
The sadness was the loss of money from tourism. That's what I was looking at, because we have these natural species.
If you do those roads, the gorillas will go away.
And there's been a lot of talk about tourism roads in the budget.
Horrible.
All right. Let's hear from Charity on the issue of corruption. What do you think is missing? What do we need to do, looking at the statement of the president here?
What is missing is known. Perry has just told you the president knows what to do. He needs to fix the problem of corruption. And he needs to listen to the talking cows. The cows are not just talking for the sake of it. The cows have a mandate under Article 38 to participate in the governance of their country. The president has a mandate under Article 99 and 98 to pretend over this country. The press has a mandate in Article 29 to report what is transformative in the country. But it gets unfortunate when the president stands and says that as part of fighting corruption, it's crucial. Imagine using the word crucial to save the amateurish political actors who come into politics without knowing that leading people does not mean carrying them on your head. I think that he needed to have rephrased his words better. I know many times he has told us he's going to crush them. When he came here on the Mabati thieves, he actually said, I'm going to crush them. Me, I believed. And when I sat here and said, I'm waiting for the president to crush these thieves, and I said, for once, now the president is really going to wield this big chiboko. He's taking down these Mabati thieves. And he wrote a second letter and he said, now I even have more confirmation on who is on this list. You're all out. I'm crushing you tomorrow. And the more he said that, the more I thought, it is real. It's no longer just perceived. But how it took a U-turn, I'm certain there are many Ugandans who are out there and they are crying like I cried. Because only two people left, Chitutu and Agnes Nandu. The list had more than 27 people. But Kenneth,
maybe he did analysis.
The point,
Dr. Twehe was talking
these
about.
jiggers which he keeps massaging and failing to take out, the jiggers can grow, they multiply.
But for some of us who had jiggers, it knows how to test in the other third finger, and yet it is the second finger. It's very hard to locate it. You had an opportunity to bring jiggers growing up.
But we better not just laugh about the jig. You know, Kenneth, until you are in hospital and you face a bill of 30 million, and the people within your racket only can afford 10 million. I mean, can afford 10,000. I'm not talking about 10 million. They can afford 10,000 Uganda shillings. And yet you hear somebody else who spends 1 billion on a daily basis. It's only then that it dawns on you that actually this problem called corruption must be fixed. It's only when you're faced with the problem of failing to take your child to school, and you're on your own. Remember, you're on your own. While another one can fly theirs to whatever city they want to fly, they even have bank accounts in foreign cities which are being frozen and given sanctions, and for you, you can't even afford not a dot of that money to send your own child to school. It's only then that you will understand why his words of just saying, I will crush the public servants, political leaders that steal government money, this money, I'm going to crush them. And these are the very words he used yesterday. He said public servants and political leaders that steal government money are corrupt and will be crushed. However, there is another category who get bribes from foreigners. Those ones are not only corrupt, but traitors. Those ones are following them. And I'm telling you, the ones he's calling traitors, those ones he will take action, because for them, he believes they're after him. But corruption is after him as well. It is after him and it's after us. Actually, it has affected us, the ordinary citizens, the most. I know he might not care so much about the ordinary citizens, but the ones who are paying taxes, they're the ones who have helped Revenue Authority to be where it is. So if they are not there, the other day traders met him in Kololo. They had a few messages for him on corruption. They told him, for us, we are paying our taxes faithfully. But you have your politicians who don't even pay tax, but they earn a certain amount of money. And we see it, we read about it in newspapers and hear what you're saying. So I think the first thing is that the president needs to reassure Ugandans. Actually, when he comes for the State of Nation address, that is what he's supposed to be doing. He's supposed to be looking at his promises he made to Ugandans and say, on this promise on infrastructure, these are the number of roads I have been able to construct. Now, when he tells us about sugar production and the number of tons of sugar and how much is left and how much is not being consumed, he should be able to tell us that, okay, do you know what the president said? Instead of telling us about that, what have we produced and what is being taken elsewhere, he just told us the following things. The president said that the NRM has managed to stabilize inflation. And that because it has managed to stabilize inflation, it is unfortunate that the person who was writing in the monitor did not see it. The other thing, he saw a cow talking in the monitor. When you see a cow talking, then you know Jesus is coming. A cow talking, saying that because we put taxes on imported dead people's clothes and other rubbish from outside, God is there. I hope God helps them to see and report the truth.
I told you about the donkey in the Bible.
Now, now the president telling you that for him, the talking cow has told him about dead bodies and clothes on the tax on dead bodies, which has been put there. There were a number of people who were selling second-hand clothes. Now they brought in pseudo investors, and he knows the problem. He has seen it. People open shops. They claim they are producing as large-scale producers, and yet they are also running retail shops and keeping Ugandans out of those businesses. And he knows it. He was told. So now he comes on a State of Nation address and does not even address an issue like that. Instead, he talks about the talking cows.
All right. Let's hear from the listener who has been following this discussion. I'm going to read some of the comments and then we'll respond to them. We begin with Ronnie, who is in Mtungo. He says, in my opinion, In my interpretation of the Monitor front page, they made that the SONA was nothing because it showed nearly an empty page. Then we have another comment. Let us also agree that Mr. Museveni cannot ably fight corruption because somehow it feeds into his ego to stay into power. Then we have a comment. Good evening, Spectrum Extra. Dr. Tuheo is talking of the president, talking of minimum recovery in the economy after being in power to close to 4 decades. By now, he will be talking of Ugandans being in first world after 37 years in power. Minimum recovery should have been mentioned after 5 years in power. The president talks of crushing corrupt officials, which promise he has been making for decades, and yet he is the same person who advises the IGG to go slow on the corrupt. As a reminder, Minister Lugolobi is still a minister in the current government after being caught red-handed with stolen government iron sheets. That is Moses listening in from here in Kampala. We have a comment from Anthony. Good evening, Spectrum Extra. We are praying for the president for more strength and wisdom. I have seen many presidents in Africa and their ideology. Uganda is growing very fast. A prophet speaks and his audience writes down. Let's listen to the president. Honorable Semoju gave reasons why he didn't put his signature on the motion. Maybe that service award was passed by Parliament. Let's think well. Amnesty can be the way forward as we move on for one unity. Then we have Muto from Bombo. Charity praised the Daily Monitor for its analysis, but I think she just provided an epic analysis of Museveni's contradictions with the fight against corruption. More like during COVID-19 when he closed hardwares but cleared building sites to continue. Well done, Charity. We have another comment from Kauma Digo, who is listening in from Itiana. Mr. Tuheo, Germany's economy was shattered by World War II. By 1972, Germany had rebuilt her economy and was able to host the Olympic Games. For Uganda, 38 years down the road, Tuheo and the NRM are saying we are now moving towards reconstruction. What a shame for Uganda. Then we have a comment from Benon Fred Twinamasko. My puzzle is how President Museveni thinks that the money we borrow with currently a blowing up debt burden is donor money that has no problem being stolen. Our grandchildren will choke while clearing the debts while the corrupt enjoy their loot. Thank you for the show. Then we have another comment. Good evening, Kenneth and the panelists. For now, I think we need to know corruption first. Sometimes stealing is called corruption. Corruption is to hire a person to open authentic doors, deployment of traffic officers in places where there are no roads. If you round kick, well, this comment is not very clear. Let's know corruption, then we solve it. It seems to say we should understand better what corruption is, then we'll be able to solve it.
If you round kick the kicks that are taking place.
Yeah, I think that's what he's talking about. If you see round kick murderers controlled by registering, okay, he's suggesting that round kick murderers should be controlled by registering motorcycles. Those are examples of how to deal with corruption. Then we have another comment. I think President Museveni is just supporting the corruption. That is Grace Kabanda with that particular comment. I'll come to you, Dr. Tuheo, very quickly for your response before we go for a break.
Admission of guilt is the first phase in either recovery or in also if you are a sinner in what do you call that? When you will admit your sins, then you are recovering from them. The president has admittedly said there is corruption. The president has admittedly said there are some evidential, circumstantial, and other situations where he has got evidence that there is corruption taking place. And that's where he wants to take action. The president, I will insist, is very, very careful on not injuring the innocent. And I can tell you, I will repeat this several times, there are so many innocent persons who are portrayed as innocent, as corrupt. Let me give you a quick example.
That's also true.
There is a point where one procurement officer declined to endorse the sale of government property. This lady has suffered. She was pushed out of the job. She went and got another job. They followed her up there until it was discovered. Until she made an alarm and said, look, you people, I'm dying under the heavy weight of resisting corruption. And of course, sometimes they can even trick them. The corrupt are very, very strong. They are powerful. And that's what the president insists. That's why he insists and says, no.
So are you saying that the president is scared like many other
He's
Ugandans?
not scared, but he's careful in his taking actions. That is why his philosophy, that's why he said he's consistent in his philosophy. He says, yes, they are the corrupt. Yes, some of these are even taken to court. Even IGG and other institutions have recovered some money from this.
All right.
I'll give you a quick example. Another quick example. There's outright theft. Me, I used to deal with the teachers. The president gave the teachers money. This money was stolen outrightly by impositors. We insisted until the money has now been recovered and put to Bank of Uganda. These fellows were put in prison for about a week only. Thereafter, the DPP said, now we want evidence. But now we have produced evidence until that money is recovered. So it takes a long process. It takes a lot of prayers. If the prayers were fewer and they could be limited to say, look, like you say, this is the thief and run after the thief with even the evidence, you would be able to act. But
let's go for break now.
A thief who is not easy to openly say, look, this is what he carried. It becomes difficult. Sometimes he can even turn back and you appear as if you are the thief.
All right, let's go for break now. When we return, we'll look at the censure motion in Parliament. We'll also shift our gears to look at the other issues to do with the regional integration, but also the economy, like Dr. Fred Muhumuza had actually introduced us in that direction. So stay tuned to Radio 1 FM 90. We'll continue after this break.
Spectrum Extra, Fridays 7 to 9 p.m. on Radio 1 FM 90.
Well, thank you so much for staying with us. This is Spectrum Extra on Radio 1 FM 90, review of the major events of the week. My guest, Dr. Fred Muhumuza, Senior Economist and Director of the Economic Forum at Makerere University Business School, where he also lectures. Ms. Charity Mbisiwe, Executive Director, Election Law Institute, Uganda Chapter. Ms. Berry Aritu, Executive Director, Women Democracy Network. Dr. James Tweheyo, Senior Officer in the Office of the President. Well, gentlemen and ladies, connected to this issue of the fight against corruption, there is the issue of the censure against commissioners of parliament. We know the Honorable Theodore Sechikubo is leading that effort, collecting signatures. I'm not so sure where they are, but at least we knew before we came on, by yesterday, the signatures were around 145. They actually need 177. He now says he can no longer talk about the number of signatures. He will only come to explain to the public at the time when the signatures, when he has met the threshold for this signature. But we have seen things that are happening. We've, for instance, heard from the NRM, which says through the chief whip, the government chief whip, that they should not append their signatures. We have seen MPs who are saying they signed in error, they were misled to sign. But there seems to be an environment where some people are trying to pull down this process. We also saw the Honorable Asman Basaliwa, who was actually promised to sue Honorable Theodore Sechikubo and the others. His argument is that this money, which was actually shared out, the 1.7 billion shillings, was actually appropriated by the entire House. And therefore, he says nothing wrong with it. Let me begin with you, Charity, on this issue of the censure. What's your take on it? And the controversies we are seeing that are emerging.
So the censure is based on the fact that there was a service award. The question of Basari were telling us that this money was budgeted for. Since when did Parliament begin to budget for service awards? Let him quote for us the rules of procedure, and let him quote for us the Administration of Parliament Act. Okay? Let him pick the law. He's a lawyer. Let him pick the law and show us the mandate. Where is it coming from?
Well, his argument is that the Parliamentary Commission...
It is a lame argument.
Plans for the welfare of the MPs, and therefore they are within their responsibilities to actually do what they did.
You see, it is a very lame argument. It is true that Parliament has a lot of leeway, even onto the consolidated fund, and which they have abused. But for him to stand and say that because we budgeted for this money, it's the reason for which I'm even going to sue the Honorable Sechikubo. Asman, watch out for Bujiri. You're my friend. But I tell you, Asman, if I have to go and talk to those people in Bujiri, in Rusoga, I will go and explain to them properly that you are supporting people who do not care about the citizens. Because what the members of parliament did in this particular instance was just to pick money and award themselves. So the people who have brought a censure motion are saying, look, as a commissioner, what is it that would warrant you to get an award for serving? There is precedent to all the old parliaments that have been here. The 11th parliament is not the first parliament to be in Uganda. There's been a 6th parliament, there's a 7th parliament, there were many parliaments, and there were commissioners in these parliaments. How many of them got a service award? How many of them budgeted for service awards? Asuman, be honest, tell the world. How many? What is so special that for this parliament, for them they had to budget for it and then distribute this money amongst themselves? I think this is being ingenious. I support the censure motion. I support Sech Kubo. I support the efforts to get rid of people who are distributing their money, distributing taxpayers' money at the expense of the taxpayer himself. And I think that the parliament should not be ingenious to come and lie to the public like this. They should apologize and pull back from this whole distribution of money. At least that could be a good place for citizens to start.
Dr. Fahim.
Morally, it is not proper for the leaders who are positioned to feed themselves at the expense of the public. It is not proper. However, there is a bigger problem than you people see. The same parliament passed a number of regulations, if I could call them, not even laws, I shouldn't call them laws, of awarding. One of them is awarding the former leaders. I think you should have noticed this coming. The former leaders were awarded former member speakers, former deputy speakers, former vice presidents. A number of them, up to today, are getting salaries. Some of whom they are even presidential advisors getting a salary here and getting those awards. For you are looking at a cash service award. But what about the other one who is given a car worth 500 million and is supposed to be serviced and managed by the same parliament? You are not looking at that. Yes, you are also not looking at the members of parliament who have been receiving money. Not even for service award. But they are given money to go to their constituencies, to monitor something, or to monitor nothing. So all those, I can see it failing for one reason. Because those who are said to be pushing for that are the very equal culprits, although in smaller measures in all these cases. So Parliament has been a little jumbled, in my view, in some of these scandals, which they do and try to justify them. Unfortunately, this is similar to what we are talking about corruption. Unfortunately, as I said, corruption is very difficult to dispel or to prove. And this same situation is one of the most difficult situations in Parliament. Because parliamentarians, as they claim, are the ones who approved it. Either bluntly, or it means what they are doing, they do it knowingly, but later when the situations become difficult, they deny them. So the question is, how are they to manage this situation? And by the way, when in Parliament it comes to eating, there is no opposition, there is no NRM. Eating is eating. They sit together and share. After all, even in that sharing, all of them shared, regardless of. And by the way, there have been questions here and there. Where was the leader of opposition then? Where were the commissioners of opposition? Did they get? Did they refuse?
Well, the leader of opposition then was Honorable Matthias Mpuga.
And
the commissioner was Mityana Municipality MP, who had been thrown out at that time. So the opposition didn't have a commissioner apart from the leader of opposition.
Because the opposition commissioner was unable to share. You see, you need to look at all these things. How did it come up, by the way? Could it have been? Because remember, it started with the Honorable Mpuga. That's when the saga started. started with these people trying to chase him out because he has failed. And
No, actually, it didn't start like that. It started with the parliamentary exhibition, the documents that
of
were
course, the exhibition,
brought out.
but later it went to the other side, to the Nup people, and they started fighting over it, trying to get Mpuga out, which they have not succeeded fully to this date. So, where is this? We must look at it closely and examine it and see the situation in Parliament. This is a very good mirror through which we can look at ourselves, through which we can look at Parliament,
Right.
through which we can take action and say, look. But when we say we break the mirror, then we may not even see where to look at ourselves.
Perry, your view on this?
You see, two wrongs don't make a right. So if we say the ones who are moving the censure motion are not equally clean, at least they are trying. And I really want to applaud them. Because for us, the citizen, we are looking at our representative. That at the end of the day, this money you are awarding yourself is citizens' money. You know, it's money which is borrowed from different countries to run this country.
But what's wrong with actually leaders being awarded?
No, it's not even in the rules. Like, why would you? It's morally wrong. Even if they had said there's a rule which allowed them. I mean, let's go back to the constituencies of these people who got those service awards. Would you find the services that the constituents need functional? That's why when one of them, I think she's from the West, when she went, the citizens were up in arms. And for me, that's why it's important to go back to the citizen. Let's take those lists to the citizens and say, your MP did not sign. Let the citizen decide. Because at the end of the day, these people are supposed to be the representative of the citizen. So for me, the argument where people keep saying they are all stealing, at least these few are saying, let us try and do something. It's like when you have sinned, there's where you ask for clemency. And you say, okay, let's start on a clean slate. They are trying. I want to applaud them. I know that even when we are grappling with women's leadership right now, at least I've had the Honorable Sarah Opendi, I've seen Persis Namuganza. You know, there are some who have said, okay, come what may.
There's one a woman who signed and later
of course, and that's why for me, those ones, the fight needs to be taken to their constituents. So that the citizen decides, is this the kind of person we need? First of all, for me, that's being unprincipled. Because the censor motion was tied to the list. So you read, that means you don't even read. Why do you sign things without reading the first page? So we take the fight back to the citizen to say, this is your representative. And you decide. The good thing, elections are just around the corner. Because for me, you know, if we keep the same people in there and they continue to abuse our money, we will not get anything in return. So let us try and change. Let's try and do something. And part of that is changing them.
All right. Dr. Fred Mumza, your take on this issue of censure in Parliament, but also service award. As somebody who has worked around public service for quite some time, there are people arguing and saying there should actually be a formula to reward people. The other day, the Auditor General, there was a motion in Parliament, a substantive motion, to discuss his service award.
You know, sometimes you can democratically legalize wrong things. It's all a question of conflict of interest. There are proverbs in our livelihoods. You can't ask a monkey to rule over the case of a forest because it's conflicted. So the moment you sit as parliamentary commissioners to take a decision where you are going to be the beneficiaries, it's already wrong for us who follow governance. That's why it should have ended. That the moment we are sitting here, the five of us, to discuss on a matter that benefits us, you want to hand it over to another. And I've seen these rules of justice. Even some people in courts, they will go there and say,
They actually disqualify themselves. They did recuse
you
themselves.
either accuse yourself, or even the accused in the dock can say, but that judge is a brother to the other one. And the rules of justice will say, yes, assign another judge. So this fellow should have immediately said, this motion should not even be discussed. Whenever we sit in board meetings, the first thing is a prayer, quorum, conflict of interest on the agenda. The moment we say there is conflict of interest on this issue, we either defer or that person will excuse themselves, or at least now we'll assess whether his presence in the meeting and participation has significance to influence the decision. If it doesn't, you stay. You don't say, when I've declared, I must leave.
Dr. Mumza, there's some people actually think that this matter goes deep to the fact that Parliament is self-accounting. So they get their budget, they decide their budget, and then sit down there.
That is not true. That is not true. We don't have three governments. There is one government. These are three arms of government. The issue of budgeting is very clear. There are principles that govern the national budget. Parliament's role in the national budget is appropriation. And they are taken over powers of even allocation.
But we never get to see what is in the budget of Parliament.
The government
never discussed on that.
Sometimes it is there. You can see it. Right now, we know we are spending 2.6 billion per day on Parliament.
What?
Yes. Yeah, 2.6 billion a day.
2.6 billion.
A day.
A day.
Now, you don't want to say, because for me, I am here and I can decide. So you say, okay, health, I will cripple your budget. Because I'm independent. No. There are rules that govern the budget. And we follow them and say, these are the priorities. Security, it is human capital development, education and health. It is this. Now, you need to follow those rules even when you come to Parliament. Now, you can say, because I'm the one who appropriates, I will allocate myself. That role, the budget is very clear and the Constitution is very clear. The President shall cause estimates of revenue and expenditure to be presented to Parliament. So still the budgeting process remains with the President. And if the President comes and says, I have only 50 trillion, and that's why we used to have ceilings. It's unfortunate that the Minister of Finance abused or forgot about ceilings. The ceilings would be saying, we have 8 million young children in school. How much money should we give per child? Capitation. If we think it is 500 shillings times the 8 million, that goes to education. How many teachers do we have? 150,000. What is their rate? Public service has already said that. Now, those rules cannot be compromised. We used even to budget for malaria drugs and other drugs to say how many people do we have? Maybe 45 million Ugandans. On average, each person will fall sick 2 times a year. How much does it cost? This information is already in the health system. On average, how much does it cost? Then you multiply. So if you follow those rules of the budget, you'll already say, what did I have from revenue? That 1 trillion. What do I have from borrowers and projects and whatever? It is this much. So if you follow those rules, Parliament will fall in. And the moment you distort those rules, somewhere a woman is going to turn up to deliver. The nurse is there because they are being paid. They are 4 million or 2 million or 1 million. But this nurse now will ask the other people gloves, the drug to stop the clotting, to start the clotting in case it fails, the cannula, because she doesn't have them. And the government is happy to announce, I have managed the inflation because I have released 0-9 wage. You've just paid a police officer not to put bullets in his gun, not to put fuel. What is a police officer without a patrol vehicle? And you are happy to say, I'm managing inflation. This is why I was saying the President's State of the Nation address is really saying, hey, you have red eyes. But you want to say, what is the cause of the red eyes? That's a deeper analysis. What are the implications on the budget, on the economy, that arise out of the way we are managing the top surface issues? I have said politics is the icing on the cake. Do we even have a cake? No, you don't focus on the ice. You focus on the real cake. Because the ice will be decided, what did the parents say her wedding colors should be, or her birthday colors should be? That's just the icing. But inward, she determined this is the type of cake that I want. Now we have forgotten the real cake. We are dissipating the icing, and the icing is never eaten by any rational people. It is for children to play with and to color the ceremony. So for me, it is these fundamentals that are not with us, that Karuma Bridge will be closed, Sezibwa Bridge will be closed, Katonga Bridge will be closed. Where are you left? And you are saying you want to export? Mutukula Road will be destroyed. You are putting a standard gauge, a meter gauge, and I don't know what. Today we had a blackout on power. And the debate is out there. Some connection went bad as we were trying to connect Karuma. Now, which engineers were these? Who hired them? Who can't do even a pretest and they bring the national crisis? There is this song. Do you want to bring this nation at stake? I think you need to play that after this show.
Nation at stake.
We need to play that.
All right, we have more comments actually coming in. Corruption and amnesty with the NRM government and YKMUSEVENI, they are only talking for cameras. Otherwise, corruption is their heart, nerve and blood that keeps the NRM government moving. You can't fight yourself. Based on his litany of threats from 1986 to now, Singing the same stanza, Mr. Museveni only fuels the engine of corruption. He can never fight it as evidenced by the team he works with and the statements he keeps making. Good evening, Spectrum Extra. Thanks for the panelists. I think corruption benefits President Museveni a lot, and this we can witness with him grabbing Uganda railway land to put private hotel, and more so all the money stolen from different government entities. He benefits from it. The only way to fight corruption is through mob justice, but nothing from government as pertaining fighting corruption. Conclusively, I was not impressed with his speech. Well, somebody suggests that the president grabbed Uganda railway land. I don't remember that. Do you, Dr. Tuheyo?
That's not correct. You see.
It depends on who owns the mysterious
Who
hotel.
owns
But that is it, and how they got it.
And how they got it.
That's the whole thing.
Right, we have another
Sometimes
comment.
People act irrationally and speak irrationally.
All right, another
Because
comment.
The president has not met their intentions and their objectives.
All right, another comment directed from Robert Inikumi, directed to you, Dr. Tuheyo. Spectrum Extra, talking about corruption, ask Mr. Tuheyo, what is a senior officer in the State House? What is a senior officer in the President's office? They want to know what's a senior officer in the President's office. We have a comment from Elder Eresu John, who is in Kavaramaido. Cotton, tea, tobacco subsectors which provided employment, high tax revenues, and incomes to different players in the economy are all dead. It's the reason why the levels of rural poverty is increasing. The industry is being set up and end processes for consumption, and with very limited linkages to the economy, to creating jobs, increases in production, employment, and income increases in other sectors. So it seems to suggest that the original sectors where many Ugandans were have been abandoned. He says, given the challenge at hand, there is no way there will be proper growth and economic development which is sustainable. Then we have another comment. Uganda has reached a point where we need a new government headed by a very good dictator. A very good dictator to put Uganda back on track. Mr. Museveni cannot fix the mess we are in now. Instead, he's slowly, surely sinking with it. See what Magufuli did in a few years when he was in power. Sanctions are coming because donors see no action being taken, yet those programs, e.g. in the OPM, are donor funded. That's a comment from Chris, who is listening in from Mutungo. Well, gentlemen and ladies, let's now shift our gears and look at some of the other issues that we did not tackle in the State of the Nation address, and that's to do with the economy, but linking it up with the East African integration agenda. And I'll begin with you, Dr. Fred Muhumuza. You had already started on that leg, the economy, and the plan that the President put forward to grow it, but also issues to do with interest rates, issues to do with unemployment, issues to do with the poverty, like Elder Honorable Resu has suggested here, rural poverty is increasing. Are we on the right track, like the President has said?
Rural and urban poverty are increasing. But as we said 3 years ago, COVID anywhere is COVID everywhere. If the poor, and the President has really mentioned quite a lot of things. Sometimes I really enjoy the President's speeches and illustrations. He talks of how they were producing milk, and there was that Indian who would take the milk from Mbarara to Kampala. They all cherished that Indian because he actually gave value to their milk. Because milk is useless for you at the farm until it finds its way to the market. And that's why economists in their principles say the customer is the king. If you do not have a customer, you have no king in that kingdom. So if there is poverty, urban or rural, even the rich should begin to get worried. Because the rich can't consume their own milk. They can't eat that meat. They can't sleep in their own hotels. They can't move in their own buses. If the poor are too poor to afford even a border or a pickup or mineral water, then anybody in that country should be worried. Because the system is not going to work. And your own property will be taken by a bank. So before you know it, you are as poor as the other poor people. So COVID anywhere is COVID everywhere. We need to be looking at that. The poverty anywhere is a very, very dangerous thing to all of us. I've always said economists in the developed world will even give money to the unemployed. They use unemployment benefits. And they will put minimum wages. It's not actually that they have those fellows down there, Muntu Wawansi. It's because actually the Muntu Wawansi sustains the system, but also empowers the Muntu Wawaguru. Because for the poor, the moment they receive their kamane, they are going to come and spend it on your own business. So we need to understand that economics, that the poverty ratio is raising, is a key concern. Inequality is even worse than poverty. Because that means a lot of things are locked up somewhere. So we need to get back to the economic principles. Now you want East African integration. Who is going to buy Ugandan sugar? The president of Rwanda said 220,000 metric tons of sugar is surplus. How do you resolve that? You're not going to sell it to the Kenyans? They have their own sugar there. Or even if they don't produce, they have Brazil, and for them they can import. So you need to begin saying, hey, could it be Ruto was looking for some kind of alliance with the rich to become an ally in NATO? What is Kenya being in NATO? So why should Uganda not be looking at some other bigger alliance to take away this sugar? Ruto is a very smart fellow, and the Kenyans have always been that. And I think the president, by mentioning the rich countries in Europe, were the first to be attacked by Germany, and they had to be bailed out by Russia. So which big player out there should we be allying with, that even if they decided to buy the smallest quantity from us, but because of their big market, they would have bailed us out? The tea sector, even as the president is mentioning value addition, people who invested in value addition in tea are now having their factories shut down. Their factories are being auctioned just because they can't access the markets. So we need to get to that conversation and say, what are the real principles that run an economy? And when I look through the principles that run an economy, we have a problem. And one of the major things that the president should be concerned about, we are now in a debt trap. And it's no longer a question of our grandchildren will be paying. We too are paying that debt. As I've said, debt has the first call on resources. So you have a 72 trillion budget. 46 of that is going into debt service, either refinancing, BOU repayment, interest payment, foreign payment, and amortization. Now you have no money left for you to repair your roads. Now you're the elites in town who are rich with your cars. Now you also are spending 6 hours because you can't go through the potholes. When there is a VTs in front of you trying to negotiate that very deep pothole. I know for you can flash over it, but what do you do with the VTs in front of you? And this owner guy really has to go in slowly and come out slowly. Like a small segment of a road is going to be a problem. And really, I pity KCCA. They are doing their best. I mean, it's the limited resources. But please, KCCA, let's find some money and pay those fellows, because for me, if they are not paid, even Wawaguru will suffer.
Spectrum X on Radio 1 FM 90. We're going for that break. When we return, we will hear the views of the others, Dr. James Toeheo, Ms. Peria Ritua, and Charity Ayinbisibu, as we continue to review the State of the Nation address, which was delivered by President YKMUSEVENI yesterday. Keep your comments coming, and when we return, I'll read out some more comments as we continue with the analysis.
Spectrum Extra, Fridays 7 to 9 p.m. on Radio 1 FM 90.
Thank you for staying with us on Spectrum Extra, review of the major events of the week. At the moment, we are looking at the economy and trying to link it up with the East African integration agenda, which was also one of the key issues President YKMUSEVENI talked about in the State of the Nation address yesterday. Let's now hear from Ms. Peria Ritua on this particular issue of the economy and the regional integration agenda, because one of the things the President talked about there is, one, if we want prosperity, we must have bigger markets, and the East African integration agenda provides that we need a bigger East African community for strategic reasons, especially security, but also we need to be united because we almost share the same heritage and destination. What is your take there? And his call for fast-tracking even of the political integration.
He actually talks about Tanzanian rice, and says that we should buy from the Tanzanian if the rice is cheaper. My question is, what then happens to our local farmer? Why not give the local farmer incentives so that the local farmer can be able to sell to the Ugandan? Because
he actually says by blocking Tanzanian rice, you're actually making the Ugandan farmer lazy.
I didn't see how
the Ugandan farmer should move to the level of the Tanzanian.
No, but the Ugandan farmer needs incentives. He needs, at times, subsidies. They need help so that they can be able to grow and compete with the Tanzanian farmer. So if the Tanzanian farmer is being supported by the government of Tanzania, and our Ugandan farmer is not being supported, then of course the Ugandan farmer is not going to be able to thrive. And at the end of the day, then that farmer is poorer. And you see, when poverty affects the one who is earning, then the children suffer. Where he or she was buying goods, the shopkeeper suffers because you now don't have the purchasing power. Then he talks about PDM being the People's Bank. It's actually not a bad idea, that 12%. My only question is, when social services are failing, most of the money that is borrowed is spent on social services. So you'll find, even if I had an intention of investing, once I have a sick person, I am not going to focus on the economic aspect of why I borrowed that money. I am going to have to use that money to go to a hospital where there are no drugs, a hospital where there are no facilities. And you see, that's why this whole conversation is tied to the conversation on corruption and how we use our resources. Because if you have services that are being provided at the health center, then it is easier for this person who has borrowed from PDM to use the money for economic growth. But if he or she has borrowed money and there's sickness in the family, they are not going to focus on the purpose for which they borrowed the money. Secondly, from the examples of people who have borrowed this money, at least the ones I'm privy to, a number of them have not actually used the money for the purpose of economic growth. They have used it to address their basic needs. Some have married new wives, others have bought new bicycles. So there's something missing in this whole conversation. Was there enough orientation? Did they target? It should even be targeting the poor of the poorest.
But those fellows are very rational. If I'm going to grow rice or whatever it is, and drought or diseases or pests strike it, I'll put my money, take a cent of water. Let me pick another wife at least. Or buy a bicycle.
Yes, but you see, the government has made a loss because the intention of borrowing was not
It's
achieved.
because you didn't understand your people.
Exactly, and that's what I'm saying. There's something missing. Now, but I like the bit where he talks about the money lenders, because I have a number of colleagues who have fallen victim to money lenders. Not only the ones who are physically borrowing from an agent whom they see, but the ones who are borrowing online. There's been this whole conversation of these people who lend money online, and there's no regulation. So it would be important to regulate that, because they have caused a lot of mental anguish. My only question is, how fast is action being taken to address these interest rates that the money lenders raise? And maybe the question is, why are people preferring to go to money lenders and not banks? The banks often still charge a very high rate. And you see, if we don't even, someone was telling me, I don't know if it's true, Dr. Mumza can actually confirm that Uganda has one of the highest interest rates in the region. So that's why most
The
people
driver is Mr. Government itself. And they are going to go higher 1st of July when the 72 trillion budget triggers into action.
Exactly. So when you're telling the Ugandan who has some little money to go and borrow from UDB, and you're not addressing the things that make it difficult for him or her, like the interest rates, for me it doesn't make sense, because they're not going to borrow.
We have a comment here coming from Crispy Kahero, who actually says, my driver Isaac Ipeto is listening in and is puzzled. He wonders why his salary, which he feels is quite fair, seems to disappear the same day he receives it, whereas this wasn't the case a few years ago. Could Dr. Mhumza help him understand why this is happening? Dr. Mhumza will be coming to you. Dr. Tweheyo, one of the issues that, first of all, let's hear your view on the issue of East African integration, but also on the issue of interest rates. Some people have actually said one of the reasons we have this problem is because of the government itself borrowing from the same market where Ugandans should borrow.
At the moment, money is in circulation. Money usually leaves government, goes into the hands of the people, goes through again to the bank, and the government draws it again. But the moment the government is borrowing, and borrowing in huge sums, and then there is another borrower who is borrowing money to be put in an investment, there is a possibility that the lender will prefer to lend government where he is assured of the recovery than lending somebody who is going to put money at risk. And this makes it very, very difficult for the borrower. And even when they borrow, they now look for alternative choices of borrowing. That is why you see people running to money lenders. Quite often, money lenders are lending people who are helpless. And the borrowers, 90% of the borrowers who go to money lenders are borrowing for consumption. consumption not necessarily for eating. He's borrowing to pay fees. He's borrowing to pay a medical bill. He's borrowing to do, and it is very, very difficult for them to recover and pay the money at the right time. So the money lenders take advantage, and they lend knowingly that this person may not even recover the money. And they even they have reached a time of looking for people around. They go to staff rooms, they go to,
They even go to the so-called guarantors.
Yes. So that's one of the biggest problems. It is a big challenge. It is even getting worse when the government itself borrows. Forget about borrowing from internal, borrowing external, and not using the money. It is a near similar situation where a person borrows money for consumption and is unable to pay. It is a near similar situation to where a government now borrows money and doesn't put it to work. When a project, even when it is personal, takes longer than it was planned, the cost of it increases. And sometimes it may even overshoot your original budget. And this is a big challenge. We must look at this. You see some of these roads. You see some of these hospitals being built. You see most of these projects. Quite often they are extensions. Go to these, even the roads that have been built in the cities. A number of times, it's only Guru which did it in record time. And this goes back again to corruption. The money that is borrowed sometimes is first shared and eaten. I hear, Dr. Muhumza will tell us, that some of the monies are put in banks, fixed accounts, to generate some income, in the name of some of these procurement bottlenecks, and they get things done after a long, long time when this money has been used for the benefit of those who are holding it. So it all comes.
It's what the president said. Finance, parliament, accounting officers.
It all comes back to that problem.
And
now,
he knows them.
Let me get to the issue actually of poverty.
Very quickly.
It is true, many of us in Uganda are poor. It is also true that even those who are earning from government are having money passing through their fingers. Yes. The money drops on account, that very day or that evening, the money is drawn.
That's the cost of living.
Yes, it becomes a little challenging. But then, some of us have gone beyond our cost of living, and we are living beyond our means. It is also another difficult issue. However, when we talk of PDM, some people have not understood the 7 pillars of PDM. One of them is major production, storage, and marketing. And it looks, we have not put it to attention of the public, because the moment we do the production and we don't store what we produce, much of our losses are actually in post-harvest handling. And remember, PDM, much of it is going especially into agriculture, by the way. Because the Muntu Wawansi is where he lives, where he survives from, and gets going. And by the way, it could have been one of the reasons why we survived during COVID, if you all remember. It is interesting that during COVID, that's when you have the bumper production. That's when you have sufficient food. Maybe because the other areas like Sudan, which we are not having enough from us, but there was that survival. So if this food we were producing and eating, if this food could be done well, properly produced, properly stored, properly marketed, the Muntu Wawansi would get enough to survive on. I can tell you, even all those who are talking about earning money and spending, the moment you earn money, and this money is used for your own consumption, you will never have any saving. So I want to add, I hope Dr. Muhumza will explain to the other driver who is talking about it. The moment you earn money, however much money you earn, which you will use for your survival, especially feeding, paying fees, clothes, you don't have anything to save. Forget.
All right.
You may earn a lot of money, but the moment your expenditure is higher than your income, you remain poor and even go in debt.
All right. So let's hear from Charity. Your take on this issue of the economy, where we are and the issue of the interest rates.
So I think that for me, the president scores highly every time he talks about issues to do with the economy. He's very, very, I think, strategic in thinking when it gets to the economy. One, he talks about a knowledge economy. The problem is, he does say these things. I wish he can implement them. Because here, when he talks about the knowledge economy, he says we can increase production. And it is true you can increase production through the knowledge economy. One of the things is the 50,000 NGOs that exist in Uganda, 50,000. But these NGOs are not being supported. Instead, they are being trailed. They're the ones, those are the imperialists, they're agents of the imperialists, they're the ones that are bringing down government. I think that if he supported some of these NGOs, especially the ones in water, food production, famine reduction, women support, because now he's talking about the GROW program. He has some money which has come in with the GROW program. If he didn't...
not his money, it's World Bank money.
Yes, it's World Bank money, but...
No, it's not World Bank money. It's our money we have borrowed.
Now then the story gets better. But okay, so there is some money which has come in for the GROW project. But if he can't trust the NGOs because of all the factors that he might have assessed or has been informed by some security forces who sometimes also give wrong information, which I think they should guard against because it is working against development on its own, he can consider churches. Some churches, not all churches, because I've also seen that churches also have become a marketplace of confusion. So he can consider some churches and use them for projects such as the GROW project. GROW, if there is money, explain it to the people and then see who are you putting there who is not going to steal this money but is going to use it to grow other people. That is the thought behind the GROW project. So it is good that it's there. But again, you will see that the people who are benefiting are only those who are related to those people who are working within GROW, which is the problem. The problem is that every time somebody is in some place, then he gets only those that are connected to him. So we are back to the question of nepotism. But if we could learn to think for the nation, how do we broaden this for everyone to get something? It would work for us. There is the fund for the women. If you critically look at this fund, it has been here for some time in the Ministry of Gender. We need analysis that happens on an annual basis. You see these NGOs which the president doesn't like too well. For them, they report. They report on a log frame. They report on documentation. They report on things that have happened and how they were supposed to operate them. I think that he can borrow a leaf even when he doesn't like these NGOs very well. He can borrow a leaf from them and see how do they account, how do they report on a program that they are implementing, and how do they carry out monitoring and evaluation. So he can use those ones, not necessarily just blanket and ban them out, and they look like they can completely not support the economy. You see, even the Constitution provides for these NGOs to work with government. The National Development Plan says NGOs support government on development programs. I think that that is when the knowledge economy works. Beyond thinking about the vaccines are good because of what we have seen. The World Health Organization is changing its tones around vaccines, and we will need vaccines, and maybe you can sell them to other people. But this would need you to have what he started some time back, a big base of people who are into science, innovation, development, and you've grown them over a period of time. These countries that you see have gone into those things, they did it over a period of time. They spent money there. And yes, you have to start somewhere. But can we start on where our strengths are? Right. Our strengths are in agriculture. Our strengths are on environment. They're on tourism. Perry told you about tourism. Our strengths are in the civil society organizations that do exist. What do we learn from there to promote ourselves?
All right, more comments coming in. Let me begin with this one from Rollins, who is listening in from Zigoti. He says, Spectrum Extra, blame the electorate. That's the quality of the legislators we elected. Vultures and hyenas. That's a comment from Lumbuya Lawrence, who is listening in from Zigoti. Then we have another good evening Spectrum Extra. Salute to my lecturer, Dr. Fred Muhumuza, and the entire team. With all honesty, the precedent set by the 11th Parliament in regard to service awards is very bad morally, and what is heroic award in service for what? Like Dr. Tuheyo highlighted. As for this 11th Parliament, feels like a total overhaul is needed. Some motions and policies should not be on the table. 11th Parliament has lost morals. Perhaps we should have a legal team, and technocrats should sieve out certain bad allocations. This Parliament has been so unfair to Ugandans. That's Rogers listening in from PG. Another comment coming in from James. Animal farmers reached Uganda. The dog speaks and man agree that service award is legit. That members of Parliament on both sides can't see the wrong of the commissioners is an indictment of the whole governance system in our country. Mr. Museveni's speech will never miss a mean in it. Who is making his government corrupt? Let him correct the history. That is Ejoy Job, Rua Boy, who is listening in from Namungona. Mr. Toheo, give us only one institution in this country that operates efficiently and without disruption of the executive. That's a comment from Sharif. Then we hear from another listener here. I wish those MPs who don't sign the status quo list are sanctioned. Another comment, Ugandans need to be reassured about leadership. We have much to offer, but we have not yet reached the end point in terms of delivery. Then we have another comment. Growth of the economy will only happen with a new government. This government can't survive without corruption. The country is currently like a stunted child. The president likes it that way. He likes it when Ugandans are poor, yet foreigners are thriving. That's why he is always insulting Amin for chasing away Indians. To him, they are Uganda's savior. That's a comment from Akram there. Then we have another comment. The current administration at KCCA is the most regrettable in the history of the city. KCCA was given 6 billion. What has it done with that money? We extravagantly put 1 kilometer of a road at 1 billion. We would have had 6 kilometers of new roads constructed with the 6 billion. The potholes that are filled with the 6 billion could not add up to the 2 kilometers which had been suggested. Well, gentlemen and ladies, we are coming to the end of this discussion. Let's sum up the discussion and try to look forward, because we know the State of the Nation address actually is a precursor to the national budget. Dr. Fred Muhumuza, do you expect anything different in the national budget, looking at what we have had in the State of the Nation address?
The national budget is not even an expectation. It is already out. We have discussed it.
Maybe the speech.
It's just the speech, and the speech will, of course, describe what we have seen and known. But just respond to, and these are the things that the budget may not distort. Economic analysis is very good, and it needs to be thorough. The colleague who said he thought his salary was fair, but it's no longer serving him. In economics, we say there is nominal money, the 20 shilling the 10,000 shillings that you have in your pocket. Real money is what can the 10,000 shillings do. If you calculate just by using a liter of fuel, if anybody had 10,000 shillings 2 years ago, a liter of fuel was 3,800. So you would get 2.6 liters. Today, a liter of petrol is 5,400. You are getting 1.8 liters. In other words, you are 30% poorer. In real terms, even as you still have your 10K. Now, that's where we say, if wages have not been adjusted upwards, people are poorer. Now, the rate of petrol may not have changed for the last 1 month. Inflation will be 0, or for the last 1 year. But remember, you are 30% poorer compared to earlier. And I hear people saying, because of stabilized inflation, demand is going to come back. Demand can only come back if we increase wages. Now, my prayer that I would have loved to see in the budget speech is increasing the taxpayers you earn threshold from the current 235 to 500,000. That will come back through consumption taxes. We don't lose the revenue. But you have now given people a little bit more money to go and restore the 30% they have lost, to consume the things they had abandoned, and then you tax a little bit more. So I want to see those kinds of coming out. So much as inflation is stable, the loss of people's incomes whose salaries did not go up remains with us.
Dr. Trujillo.
We have a bigger challenge when we look at the developmental requirements and we don't consider the wealth creation. A number of our people are living on cash, and we haven't reached that level of carrying a card to look for whatever we need. Until we remember that this development we're talking about, and by the way, it is making the situation worse. That's why you hear every other person now crying of poverty. You talk of an NGO bringing water, water is charged at the end of the month, but somebody's income is static. The one who was earning from his banana plantation, selling the bananas, you'll find that the sunshine has changed and now the bananas are even at a lower cost. And at the end of the day, he has a bill. You talk of electricity going to the villages, and we all say, oh, go thank God the government is bringing electricity. But this electricity is coming with a cost. And my income, if it has not increased, it is actually making me poorer, although I'm enjoying the service, provided this electricity that has come is not used for production. So as long as we have not yet been able to balance, and we need to have that mindset change, as long as we have not been able to balance the literal development that is coming with the creation of wealth this development is bringing to us, we shall be even in more problems than we thought. I can tell you, my mother who was fetching water from the well was not paying a bill. But this time when she has a tap there, she has the bill, yet her income may remain constant from selling a bunch of bananas or from selling just a cob of maize, and it becomes a bit of a problem. So we need to concentrate on the two, but also make sure that we have the mindset change of our people to make sure that there's that wealth creation element in us. If you can live in a town, and the only thing you can plant are flowers, then you are in trouble. The other one, maybe you planted a tomato around the house, has been able to save the day of going to Kariro to buy tomatoes. The other one who planted a fruit in the compound, an avocado fruit, instead of planting an ornamental tree, is benefiting. The other one who planted a sugarcane near where that water is flowing is better than, in terms of expenses. Maybe he may have 500 shillings staying in the pocket that night. And that is the whole problem. So we need to put our attention to that, save ourselves, and keep floating amidst the development that is competing again now with the little income that is constant with us.
Perry, as we come to the end of this show, your closing remarks.
Just two things. One of those who sent a message said that how do we sanction the MPs? We sanction them through the election. 2026, if they have not performed, you vote another leader. Because the more we change them, maybe we will eventually get the ones who are a little bit serious. But in terms of, I think most of the messages just showed a frustration with the economy and the way things are going. And I think it's incumbent on our leaders to try and do at least something. From the comments, even if it's two things. I mean, the Ugandan citizen just is looking for solutions. That, for me, is what I would get from the comments.
Charity, your closing remarks as we come to the end of this show.
So I think my parting shots will be, the president called us to think about a united market. And I want to agree that there is a time when the market in Congo was opened, and the president said we now have one big market. We can take our products to Congo, to Kenya, to Tanzania. But what kind of products are we taking there? Even the Lato milk, which we were producing and were supposed to export to Dubai, we failed along the chain. What is failing us? I think this is why I told you that in terms of monitoring and evaluating, there's something we are failing with somewhere. And so we need government. It's actually because it's government programs. Government needs to go back and monitor its own programs and identify where are the weaknesses and how do we improve on the processes of utilizing these markets. If the market is there, if we have a united African market, I don't think we have attained this one yet, but at least we have the East African market. We have the market in Congo. There are things that they are producing which are the same like us. For him, he talked about tribes producing the same thing, but if you look at the food stuff in Uganda, it is the same like what is in Congo, and sometimes Congo has better. Right. So for us, we need to specialize in what they don't have, and then we export it to them.
Dr. Fred Muhumuza, in a few seconds, closing remarks as we come to the end of this show.
I think let's put economics into the management of the economy and allow it to work. Thank you.
All right. We have discussed this State of the Nation address, but we know the budget is coming up next week. We will also be able to connect the same with this particular discussion we have had today. Good news coming in from Nambole, full-time, Uganda Cranes 1, Botswana 0 on that side. From me and the team here in studio, it's a good night and God bless you.
Spectrum Extra on Radio 1 FM 90. An extra hour of analysis and discussion on the topical issues of the week. Brought to you by Housing Finance Bank, a financial institution regulated by Bank of Uganda. Housing Finance Bank, we make it easy.
The views expressed on this show are not necessarily those of this radio station or its management.